course, adjourned, so I would ask the clerk to retake the roll, please. Senator Lucas around. Clerk, close the roll.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Clerk. We are open for business again. As all of you are aware, following along, we had a fairly heavy agenda this morning, and we passed by all those bills dealing with tax conformity and tax policy. We're now in a posture where we want to take those bills up. As far as patrons of measures of these types of bills, our action that we hope to take right now will preclude some of these bills from advancing because they're duplicative and or have a little bit different direction, and we will try to address that as we go through. But our first item of business, we're going to take up Senate Bill 1372, Senator Norman's conformity bill, with the hope that we can use that as a vehicle for accomplishing our goals today. Senator Norman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. And I would preemptively say that if the concept embodied in 1372 is agreeable, I am happy to have any patron that introduced a conformity bill to join in that bill as a co-chief patron. There is no exclusivity on my part on it. Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute to 1372, and has that been distributed?
Has not, but if we could receive that as a motion that we adopt that substitute as our vehicle. Motion probably supported. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we have the substitute now as that's being distributed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As all of the members of this committee know, that before we can appropriately and responsibly address spending issues, that we need to define as best we can what the revenues are available to be spent. So we've been trying to, some of us have been trying to work on a revenue bill to quantify that as best as we can based upon the unpredictability of taxpayer behavior, so we can move forward and start constructing a Senate budget on the expenditure side. Mr. Chairman, I would preemptively say that I'm sure it makes some of you nervous when I'm up here talking about dollars and cents, because Chairman Hanger is much more agile on the numbers than I am, but I just want to extend my appreciation to both Senator Hanger and Senator Newman, who have been very instrumental in trying to mold a conformity bill. What is going to be presented to you as briefly as I can in Senate Bill 1372 is a conformity bill that has certain exceptions to it. And the exceptions were designed to provide some tax relief to the tax-paying citizens of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I'll try to walk you through a number of principles that are embodied in the amendment in the nature of substitute. First of all, the bill advances conformity of Virginia's tax code with the federal tax code to the December 31, 2018, TCJA, as we all refer to. One of the first things that this bill does is for the tax year of 2018, it provides for an income tax refund of up to $110 for individual taxpayers and $220 for married taxpayers who are filing jointly. That tax refund check obviously would be paid in the 2019 fiscal year, but would be based upon the returns that are filed for 2018. The refund would not exceed the taxpayer's tax liability. The refund is in addition to any other ordinary overpayment refunds due the taxpayers, and that would be one of the first provisions that would take place. Beginning in the taxable year 2018, it extends the existing corporate income tax subtraction for foreign income, which is affectionately known as GILTI. And frankly, I goggled it and read it, and I'm still not completely sure of what I read, but I do know it deals with intangible property, and I know it deals with foreign corporations that have a 50% or more ownership by U.S. taxpayers. So it would pick up a deconformed, if you will, a deconformed component on GILTI. It would also pick up a deconformed on what is referred to as SALT. And of course, SALT is the cap of $10,000 that is under TCJA of deduction for state and local taxes. And so there is a provision in there that decouples, if you will, the SALT provision in 2019. In an effort to provide a broader base of tax relief beyond the $110 individual tax refund or the $220 for families, it increases the standard deduction for a single person to $4,500 and for a marital couple to $9,000 that are filing jointly, and that would take place beginning in 2019. So the bill would, first of all, provide for a tax refund to those that have paid taxes of $110 and $220. It deconforms GILTI. It allows for deconforming of the SALT provision. It increases the standard deduction. And for those that are interested in the business community, we could not do a full restoration of the deduction for the net interest increase deduction. And based upon responsible numbers that we have available to us, it will provide a 1/5 or 20% provision for the net interest deduction. Tax has been incredibly thoughtful in running numbers. As you may well anticipate, we know what 2018 tax returns are going to be. But looking forward, we cannot predict what the behavior of taxpayers is going to be after that. One of the fiscally responsible concerns that we had was to make sure that there was some money that was available to take care if there was an unanticipated or unusual taxpayers' behavior. So if we take all of those provisions that I just reviewed with you, the refund, the GILTI, 20% of the net interest deduction, the SALT, and the increase in the standard deduction, it will leave about $85 million. And that $85 million will be put in a non-reverting tax reserve account so that there is a cushion in there if for some reason the numbers that we have run are off. And if the numbers will not be off because there's been any erroneous assumptions on our part, because tax has been conservative and responsible in sharing the numbers with us, but to make sure that we do have that allowance. I fully understand that everyone is not going to be happy with the total structure of this, and there are other approaches that are laudable, but that is the outline of it, and I am happy to defer to Senator Newman, who has been very instrumental in bringing this together, if he has any comments that he would like to add.
Okay. Senator Newman, would you have anything to add at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I think the chairman has given a pretty good explanation. I'd be glad to help answer questions as to how we came up with this. The only thing I would repeat that the senator mentioned is the Department of Tax has been really working with our staff, and so has this staff has been working in overtime to help get this right. We have assumed in this that the House has not quite moved yet on their conformity bill yet. We are moving as quickly as we can on our conformity. As you know, the tax numbers, they have changed a little bit because when you come up with an idea and then you aggregate them with all the other ideas, the first idea is less or more based on what a taxpayer will do. And so tax has figured that out for us, but it has taken maybe a little longer. The only other thing, Mr. Chairman, I would add, and I know that the two chairs have worked diligently on this, is that we have tried to make sure that we spread this out as much as possible so that even if someone is just paying in, let's say, not even the 110 as a single individual, but just paying in $60, we wanted to give that $60 back. So we wanted to make sure that as much of that to the low income was given as possible. The other is, by going forward with the two big items, which is the refund checks, which will come out whenever in October or something near that this year, they will be given back based on just a dollar amount. So it doesn't matter if you're paying in just $200 or you're paying in $200,000, you still get back $200, and so that's the way it happens. And then the second year and moving forward, and Senator Norman's bill does put a policy going forward in the bill, which looks like the standard deduction increase of $4,500 and $9,000. That, of course, too, is fair across the board. So if you are paying in the $200 or you're paying in the $200,000, you will still get that amount because you pay in substantially more. It also, the senator has been exactly right that the bill does not have an earned income tax credit, so only those individuals that are paying in end up receiving the benefits. So, Mr. Chairman, I think the senator got it basically right, and I'll just wait for other questions.
Senator Hanger, you've been very helpful in trying to address this. Any comments or corrections that you make of my misspeak is welcome.
Thank you, Senator Norman. Just a couple of things that I would point out. Obviously, this is a process that we're in. You're all aware of that. This is where we're laying our marker down because we've debated this extensively, certainly within our caucus, and now trying to reach out to the other caucus so that we can come to some accord on this. The important thing to note is that the cumulative impact of the policy decisions we're trying to advance here today, and this is why it's critical to the timeline, is going to reduce our general fund revenue that we potentially could appropriate by $451.7 million in 2019 and $438.7 million in fiscal year 20. That's important in that as we've been working on our budget now, reviewing amendments, and we'll continue to do that in our effort to put a budget on the table Sunday afternoon, that money will not be available. But with this policy decision, if we can make this today, we'll be able to coordinate our budget with the revenues available, less those amounts which we're allocating to tax relief to lessen the impact of the federal changes if we had done nothing in reaction to that. The other point that I would make out, Senator Norman, as we worked on this, that either formally in the budget or informally, if actions that we might take in concert with the House and the administration, I would hope that since we can only work with what we know now, and we don't know everything now because we don't know, as Senator Norman indicated, taxpayer behavior, that we would basically put in place either formally in the budget or from direction of the chairs of the committees and the administration, some task force that will be charged with the responsibility of evaluating tax policy going forward. I think we're overdue for that. I've been involved in that task on other occasions, and I think there are a number of things that long-term we can do in addition to what we've outlined here today. But for today, I think this is the best proposal that we could come up with. Are there questions at this time?
If I could make
Mr.
just
Senator Norman.
another comment or two, if you don't mind. On it, this was work in progress last night, and I don't know if everything got done that I had asked, but one of the things I had requested was that for a copy of the draft, which came in the late evening, was to be sent to two of my colleagues who are sitting up there, and I don't know whether it happened, but it wasn't because I did not make an effort to see that it was sent to you almost as soon as I got it. So I apologize for that. Not casting stones down the hall, I would just say that there have been a number of press releases that have been shared from the House of Delegates as they have worked on their tax plan. And I would say that there has actually been some curiosity, if not criticism, why the Senate has not been more forthcoming. And that is because we have been trying to move in a deliberate manner and not preemptively make any announcements before we have a direction or even have the skeleton of a plan together, so that we don't find ourselves perhaps backing up a little bit. After any questions or comments from members of the committee, Secretary Lane is here, who would like to speak very briefly on that. So however you choose to handle
Okay.
this.
First, I think Senator Howe is indicating an interest in speaking. I'd like to allow her that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Senator, the bill was sent to me late last night, but it was sent to an email address I don't use. But the intention was good. I understand your intention.
I apologize.
Yeah, that's fine. We're talking about $452 million in this fiscal year and $439 million in the next fiscal year. We're talking about a decision that impacts our budget by $890 million over this biennium. And frankly, there's been very little collaboration or discussion. The Democrats, I can assure you, have had no input whatsoever on this. And we're not informed until late last night as to which direction it was going. We could have done what we always do, which is have a standalone conformity bill. And I think those of us on this committee all would have, at least the Democrats, would have liked to have that happen. Instead, we've now mixed up conformity with serious tax policy, with major implications, with no discussion to speak of. And now we're in a really difficult position because it has an emergency clause and needs 80%. And I doubt there's any way it's going to get 80%. So I would suggest that perhaps we regroup and include all of the significant players and come up with a bill that we can agree to.
Thank you, Senator Howe. Other members? Let's hear from Secretary Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Sponsor Bill, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak. First of all, Aubrey Lane, Secretary of Finance, should point out that the governor takes no position on the legislation, but he has steadfastly said he was willing to talk about it, how we move forward. And with that, I'd like to make just a few comments in mind. First of all, to what Senator Howe pointed out, the bill does separate the treatment between 2018 and 19, but it doesn't actually separate conformity from it. And getting 80% may be difficult, although the bill does treat that differently with the impacts coming in 20. The emergency clause would have to come into play in that regard. So I would give some additional thoughts as to how we could separate that to move clean conformity forward. Having said that, there are a lot of things in the bill that, quite frankly, would foster continued discussion to move forward. First of all, I think it is pretty easy for the taxpayers to understand. People understand refunds and they understand the standard deduction. So from that perspective, it keeps the character of our tax department, meaning that we don't need additional bureaucracy for compliance because there's not a different basis between the state and the federal taxes in that regard. And the business items that are noted in here are typically what we do deconform to. It's consistent with the current application of businesses in there. So from that perspective, there are some very positive things that continue this going forward. Now, as you know, the governor favored the earned income tax credit for those under 50,000. And I think that's a continued discussion we need to have. The bill does address some of those in another way for people under 50,000, but I think we'd like to go through this and look at it, see how it impacts them. And of course, as Senator House put out, at the end of the day, it is going to impact our budget and the governor's investments. That'll all be taken apart. But would like to just point out, I would appreciate the body, and as far as this, I think it is thoughtful and meaningful thought out in a way to continue the conversation. And with that, thank you for letting me make a few comments.
Thank you, Secretary Lane, and we welcome that continuing conversation. Senator Obenchain?
Mr. Chairman, thanks for recognizing me. I want to thank both Chairman, Senator Newman, and everybody else involved in this bill. One thing that I think is important to point out is that we're not talking about taking money away from the government. What this really is addressing what would otherwise be a massive tax increase on the people of Virginia. If we simply conform, as was suggested, the people of Virginia will be paying substantially more tax, and this is providing them with the relief that I believe people across Virginia really want. And I would respectfully submit that if we simply adopted standalone conformity and in hopes that at some point we'd be able to return some of this money to the taxpayers. You know, I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. And I'm not going to hold my breath and wait for that to happen. And with respect to the surprise, I see a list of 14 bills that were introduced that some of my colleagues on my side of the aisle introduced that all spoke in terms of the concepts that are built in and baked into this bill, and it really represents the views of a lot of members of the General Assembly. I see no bills, none, not one, that was introduced representing a perspective on the other side of the aisle, and that's how we speak, is through our bills. And so what I would respectfully submit that this is something that taxpayers of Virginia expect. They don't expect us to increase their taxes just by allowing conformity to take place, and I think that respectfully submit that this is a responsible approach being taken by the committee.
Thank you, Senator Obenchain. Yes, Senator Barker, you happen to be carrying the one exception to what Senator Obenchain said there, the earned income tax credit.
Well, I was just figuring that the senator from Rockingham thought I was voting too often with the Republicans to be considered a Democrat. But sometimes yes and sometimes no. But one of the things I think would be helpful is to have as much information behind each of these. And I think, as I gather from quickly going through this and listening to the presentation, is that there are 5 categories that are changed and that in combination add up to the almost $900 million over the biennium. It would be helpful to have for each of those 5 how much in each of the 2 years of the biennium would be there, okay. And basically a little more clarity in terms of who would benefit in what ways from some of these changes. And, and there are some issues, and it does not always go, it's not that the benefit is the same for every taxpayer there on some of these things. So I think that would be helpful as well.
All right, Senator Barker, I think Senator Newman has, and I think staff will be shortly producing for everyone of the numbers for each of those categories. Senator Newman?
Let me just give you an overview because it is the right question, right? So,
Senator Newman, if I could interrupt you just a second. We actually have a matrix that we can share with you, and we just had to tweak it very recently based on some updated numbers. And so while Senator Newman is speaking, I'm asking the matrix to be distributed to the members of the committee, so it'll partially answer your question.
Good. I wasn't
Excuse
sure
me, Senator Newman, for interrupting you.
So I'm glad we have the chart. It'll cut down on any confusion. Clearly, the Secretary is right. We have anticipated, and tax has been very, very helpful in providing to us that we believe that in FY19, which is 18 taxes, there will be approximately $532 million. And then we're anticipating that in 2019, which we will receive in 2020, that amount will be $444 million. That's the expectation. The reason it's less, and Mr. Lane can speak to that if you want to, is we anticipate that there will be changes in taxpayer behavior to kind of offset some of these difficulties, which will lower the amount of overtax that will take place. The total amount is still the 976, so that's the top line. The biggest difference between year one and year two is year one, as you heard, we're hoping to have a refund of that 110 for single individuals, 210 for married individuals. That will be in October. That ends up being $420 million. That will be issued out. There will also be the GILTI that we talked about $7 million, and then the interest deduction of $25 million. There is, because there is no, we're simply sending out checks, there will be no local and state deduction or the SALT deduction in the first year. Simply, it'll be a check out. If you paid that amount, it'll be a check out. What's not included, I guess, I'm sorry, going up to the $420 million, is that if you do pay in less than $110 or $220, we're going to refund that money back to you. So if you paid in $90, we're going to pay that money back. Mr. Chairman, that does end up with the bottom number of $80 million, as Senator Norman had indicated. And the year two, things do change. The GILTI does change to the correct number, which is $5 million. The 1/5, because we think there's going to be some behavioral changes, will go down to $18 million, and the deconformity from the state and local taxes will be $56 million. So that leaves a smaller amount for the standard deduction, but we thought that we did need to take care of those businesses that are paying it in so that we make sure we cover at least a portion of that money. That ends up being the $360, and if you do that math, it's raising the standard deduction basically 50%. So we're going up to $9,000 for families, where it was at $6,000 before. So if you put all those together, the final in FY20 is $439. We've tried to keep that number very close, which is $5 million that year. So we're trying to give basically it all back, and that's, you can criticize it, but that is really kind of the intent. But we do keep the $80 million and the $5 million for the ups and downs of what taxpayers may do. We still are not sure, unless Mr. Lane can tell us otherwise, that the 532 and the 444 are going to be exact, but this goes into a special non-reverting fund to smooth out those ups and downs. So the bill also has the policy of 2020. If you take that policy of 2020 and it makes that permanent until the newly tax cuts are no longer in effect. So there is an end to that. And also, it does not allow us to return more back than what we bring in. That was a responsibility item that we thought was important, so you can't end up giving back more. The desire, and I think the overriding desire is that we would return the money that comes back for this purpose. So I hope that helps, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Norman.
Perhaps I should have started with this, but there are basically three areas of money that we have to consider for spending. And one is, this, of course, from the new tax laws, the federal tax laws. That is one silo. And then we have ongoing additional growth revenue. And then we have these other changes to the balances, which can be transfers. But one of the things when you were thinking in terms of the spending is the reality of this. That there's approximately $548 million that we are aware of in additional revenue growth that would be available. But what I need to remind everyone is that a majority of the General Assembly made some decisions last year, and unfortunately, we had an erroneous forecast in the area of the Medicaid forecast, and it had nothing to do with expansion. I think it was under managed health care. But there is about $548 million that has been projected as ongoing additional revenue growth. Of that 548, 463 million of it has to go to backfill that erroneous forecast on Medicaid. So as we're thinking in terms of spending, immediately 463 million has got to be paid. So as we look at those three silos of revenues that we have, that one is diminished almost 80%.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Yes, Senator McDougal.
Mr. Chairman, as I'm listening to the debate, looking out there, I always think about how would my 7-year-old, when I have to go home tonight and explain this to her, because she's going to ask me questions about what I did today. And I'm going to say, very simply, there was a choice between what to do. Mr. Chairman, that choice was to take the money that Virginians would have gotten from the federal tax relief and give it back to them. And this plan gives that money back to them. There are other choices, but none of the other choices gives all the money back to the citizens that pay it. It's pretty simple.
Other members? Senator Barger, you have a follow-up?
Just one other follow-up question, just sort of more technical than substantive here. The refunds, as I see here, I think it's going out in October of 2019, but it's listed as fiscal 19 rather than fiscal 20. Can you?
Mr. Chairman, I would respond to Senator Barker. We haven't pegged a date yet, but we would obviously need the 2018 returns in, and so it would be sometime after that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, and not trying to stimulate a debate, and Lord knows anybody that is sitting up there knows that there have been some occasions where I've drawn a line in the sand, and I will own that. I would just say I think we collectively need to be very circumspect at preemptively drawing a line in the sand as to where we're going to go. This was not a deliberate effort to run the clock out. It has been a challenging opportunity to get this far. So I just offer that as a thought.
Okay. And my thought would be, in terms of as your explanation of the available revenue resources to us, that it will be obviously a more modest budget that we can produce than what the governor presented to us. A lot of his, though, was in the out years. You know, he was talking about what we're going to do over a 5-year period, Secretary Lane. But in the interim, obviously, it will be more modest. But I think, as I've reviewed our budget options, it will be adequate. And so that's what I'm hopeful we'll be able to deliver to you on Sunday afternoon. With that, is there?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I listened intently to Senator Norman.
That would be the first time.
And I particularly was interested in about not drawing a line in the sand. And I would say that basically that's a two-way street. Okay?
You know, I haven't been here since 1699 like you, Senator Saslaw, but I have lived through experiences where Republicans and Democrats have drawn lines in the sand, and more often than not, it doesn't work out particularly well. And I've been on the receiving end, and I have been on the giving end, sir. So, you know, Grandpappy Norman said, you know, Tommy, if you throw a punch, you better daggone well be able to take one.
Okay. All right.
Jay,
What's the pleasure of the
you bet.
committee? Motion properly supported that the bill, that is Senate Bill 1372 amendment in the nature of a substitute, be reported. Further discussion? Hearing none. Clerk, open the roll. Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 11, noes 5.
Ayes 11, noes 5. Thank you, Senator Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the members of the committee for your patience and your understanding.
Thank you, Tommy. Well done.
Members of the committee, we have some additional business I'd like to take care of right now. And there are a number of bills that I will invite the patrons of these individual bills to sign on as co-patrons of the bill we just advanced, if they care to. But I would recommend to you, members, Senate Bill 1297, Senate Bill 1211,
You want to roll yours? No.
Senate Bill 1697, Senate Bill 1698, Senate Bill 1225, Senate Bill 1237, Senate Bill 1631, Senate Bill 1657, Senate Bill 1739, Senate Bill 1572, Senate Bill 1630, Senate Bill 1443, Senate Bill 1531, and Senate Bill 1744, that they be passed by indefinitely. Yes, if there, I know there are members here that would not choose to be, but any member that would, and it's going to be difficult, I think, on a procedural vote, can we do that? What I'd intended to do, unless there's a specific request to have their bill rolled in right now, that the bills be passed by, but then the members have an opportunity to sign on as co-patrons. Right, Chief Co-Patron.
Mr. Chairman, and I just would reiterate that if a decision is not made this afternoon, that we would be receptive and try to procedurally facilitate anyone that would want to join on as a patron in any degree.
What's that? Okay, all right.
There's more here that won't roll, Mr. Chairman, if you just.
Okay, all right, we had, as we built the bill, we're intending to roll Senator Norman and my bill together. Senator Newman's bill, which is Senate Bill 1739, would be rolled in by number. Is anyone else that wants to be rolled in by number? Beg your pardon? 1631. Any others? 1657.
Start of it, once again, 1531.
1531. 1443. Distef 1237. Any others?
Mr. Chair, I will consult with a couple of people, and then we'll get back to you as to whether to mine.
Okay,
Well,
well,
I'll
you'll
roll
need
mine in.
you'll need to sign on as a chief co-patron then, I guess, if we do it that way. Or,
That's fine, that's fine.
right, okay, all right. The motion then would be that all of those bills be rolled in as chief co-patrons by number into Senate Bill 1730, Senate Bill 1372. Okay? Is that the motion? Is there a second? Second. Motion properly supported that we would take that action in combining bills. Clerk, open the roll. Clerk, close the roll.
At 16:00.
Okay, those bills are consolidated. Then that would leave Senate Bill 1297, Senate Bill 1211, Senate Bill 1697, Senate Bill 1698, Senate Bill 1225, Senate Bill 1572, Senate Bill 1630, and Senate Bill 1744. You didn't make a request, did you, there? Right. Okay, 1744 to pass by. Motion, is there a second? Second. Motion properly supported. Clerk, open the roll. Clerk, close the roll.
At 16:00.
Okay, all those bills are passed by, but the invitation would be that after those patrons have looked at the consolidated bill, if they'd like to sign on as chief co-patrons, they certainly can, and that's what we will do. There is one remaining announcement. We have Senate Bill 1762, Senator Wagner, that came out of local government yesterday, that will be heard by you in your Transportation Subcommittee this afternoon. Senate Bill 1762. Anyone following that? Is there further business to come before the committee? Hearing none, thank everyone, and we look forward to the continued conversation. The committee will rise.